Jamie's heart raced as the old attendant's whisper sliced through the static air, sending chills down her spine. She froze, her hand still wrapped around the cold soda can, as the static from the old radio crescendoed into a piercing screech. The atmosphere thickened, heavy with foreboding, as the flickering lights cast jagged shadows across the dusty aisles of the gas station. Her eyes darted to the windows, half expecting to see something sinister lurking just beyond the glass. The air seemed to pulse with tension, and every creak and moan of the old building felt like a warning. Mark and Linda, the lost couple, clung to each other, their earlier fatigue replaced by a palpable dread. They too felt the shift, a silent acknowledgement that this place held secrets far darker than its neglected appearance suggested. Outside, the wind howled like a mournful specter, stirring the tall grass into waves of ghostly whispers, as if the night itself were speaking. Jamie, grappling with a rising panic, turned to the attendant. "What do you mean? They're closer than you think? Who are they?" Her voice was a mix of fear and demand for answers. The attendant, his face a mask of resigned fear, glanced towards the back of the store before looking back at her, his eyes glinting with the urgency of unspoken truths. "Not all is as it seems here," he murmured cryptically. "This place, it's like a beacon to them on nights like this. You'd best stay inside till daylight." Before Jamie could press him for more details, a sudden movement in the periphery of her vision caught her attention. She turned just in time to see the shadowy figure of the old woman who had been muttering about her missing cat. She was now standing closer to the station, her eyes empty pools reflecting the dim neon light, her mouth moving in a silent curse or prayer. The couple noticed too, and their unease deepened into terror. "What is happening here?" Linda whispered, her voice trembling. The station seemed to close in around them, the walls inching closer, the ceiling pressing down as if the very structure wanted to swallow them whole. As the minutes stretched into what felt like hours, the radio suddenly snapped to life with clear music, a haunting melody that seemed too serene for the night's eerie turn. The sudden normalcy of the music was jarring, contrasting starkly against the night's events, and it did nothing to ease the mounting dread. It was then that the lights flickered one final time before dying out completely, plunging them into darkness. Avery sat cross-legged in the corner of the night's bed, his camera high and ready to roll. The last thing Jamie heard before the scream started was the wind, now mocking them with its fiendish wails, as shadows began to move just beyond the reach of the station's dying lights. The stale air of the gas station hung heavy as Jamie, Mark, and Linda stood rooted to the spot. It wasn't just the sound that alarmed them. A palpable sense of dread seeped from the cracks beneath and around the doorframe, as if the very essence of the chamber it guarded was reaching out, touching their souls with icy fingers. Jamie's mind raced with thoughts of the attendants' tales. Stories whispered as mere superstitions among locals, but now felt intensely real and terrifying. According to him, the land upon which the gas station stood was cursed, soaked in the blood of forgotten conflicts and ancient rites too dark to name. He spoke of spirits and entities, neither dead nor alive, trapped in a perpetual twilight of existence. Their anguished whispers carried on the wind that swept through Midvale's valleys. Driven by a mixture of fear and an irrepressible need to know, Jamie stepped forward. With a deep breath, Jamie turned the knob. The door creaked open with a mournful groan, revealing a narrow staircase spiraling downward into darkness. The air that billowed up from the abyss was colder than the night air outside, filled with the musty, damp odor of earth long untouched by sunlight. Mark fetched a flashlight from behind the counter, casting a weak beam of light that barely penetrated the oppressive blackness below. Nurmak smiled as he went down, but Jamie could see Mark's bilge. As they descended, the walls seemed to close in around them. The rough stone was damp to the touch, covered in patches of moss and other unidentifiable growths that felt like the decaying skin of the chamber itself. Every step taken echoed, multiplied into a cacophony of whispers that seemed almost human, as if the shadows themselves murmured in a language lost to time. The further they went, the stronger the feeling of dread became. It was an almost physical presence among them, pressing against their chests, making it difficult to breathe. Linda clutched Mark's arm, her eyes wide with fear, her mouth set in a silent scream. They should turn back, but each step forward was driven by an unnerving compulsion to see, to understand, to confront whatever awaited them in the heart of this unearthly tomb. crawl, clutched at whatever the window of opportunity. Their path finally ended in a large, cavernous chamber. The flashlight's beam flickered across walls covered in carvings so ancient and corroded they seemed to shift and dance in the shadows. In the center of the room stood an altar, its stone surface grooved with the channels of old bloodstains. Around it, the ground was littered with remnants of what looked like offerings. Bones wrapped in tatters of clothes, dried flowers, and other less identifiable objects that time had not been kind to. Suddenly, the flashlight flickered and died, plunging them into darkness. Panic surged as the silence of the chamber was broken by a sound, soft at first, like the rustling of wind through dry leaves, but growing louder, more urgent. Footsteps, they realized. Footsteps that were not their own. A chill ran down Jamie's spine as the darkness seemed to pulsate with life, the ancient carvings glowing faintly with eerie phosphorescent light. Shadows began to move, coalescing into forms both human and not, their outlines blurred and shifting. A voice, deep and resonant, broke the near-deafening silence. It came from all around them, from the very walls and air of the chamber itself. "Who dares disturb the slumber of the ancients?" it boomed, each word resonating with the power of the unseen speaker. The ground trembled slightly under their feet, dust and small pebbles rattling down from the ceiling. Sean stepped, frozen with fear. Jamie found her voice, small and trembling. "The truth," she called out into the darkness. "We seek only knowledge, not to disturb or desecrate." A low laugh echoed through the chamber, chilling them to the bone. "Knowledge? What knowledge do you seek in the darkness that men were meant to forget?" the voice challenged, its tone mocking. Suddenly, the center of the room lit up with a ghostly light, illuminating the altar in a ghastly glow that seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere at once. Figures appeared around them, half seen in the dim light, their features twisted in expressions of pain and anger. They moved closer, their forms flickering like flames. As the dim glow of the flashlight illuminated the ancient symbols etched deep into the cavern walls, Jamie, Mark, and Linda found themselves drawn deeper into the mystery of the underground chamber. The stale air was thick with the scent of decay and old earth, a palpable reminder of the long-forgotten rituals that had once been practiced here. The trio stood on the precipice of the unknown, the weight of centuries bearing down upon them. Each breath a labor against the oppressive atmosphere of the chamber. The silence was absolute, a pressing void that seemed to swallow even the sound of their own breathing. Then, without warning, the faint light from the flashlight began to flicker, casting long shadows that danced across the chamber walls. The shadows twisted into grotesque shapes, morphing into silhouettes that seemed almost human. Jamie's heart raced as she realized that the walls were not just marked with symbols, but adorned with bas-reliefs that depicted scenes of ancient rites and ceremonies. Scenes that seemed to come alive under the flickering light. A sudden, sharp noise cut through the silence, a clatter like stone scraping against stone. The sound reverberated through the chamber, setting their nerves on edge. They turned towards the source of the noise, the beam of the flashlight trembling in Mark's hand. There, at the far end of the chamber, a section of the wall was slowly moving, sliding away to reveal a hidden passageway. They blinked, a second more anticipated than scared. A cold draft emanated from the newly revealed opening, carrying with it a faint, almost imperceptible whispering. It was as if the very air was alive with the voices of the past, whispering secrets long buried. Compelled by a mix of fear and fascination, they approached the passageway. The air grew colder as they drew nearer, the whispering clearer. It was no longer just a soft murmur, but distinct voices speaking in an unknown tongue. The words were chilling, filled with an urgency that belied their incomprehensible meaning. As they stood at the threshold of the hidden passageway, a sudden gust of wind blew through the chamber, extinguishing the flashlight and plunging them into darkness. In the blackness, the whispering voices grew louder, more insistent. A soft, phosphorescent glow began to emanate from the symbols on the walls, casting a haunting light over the chamber. The light revealed that the figures in the bas-reliefs were moving, their stone limbs grinding against stone as they enacted the ancient rites depicted on the walls. The figures' eyes glowed with an unnatural light, their gazes fixed on Jamie, Mark, and Linda, as if they were intruders in a sacred ritual. Frozen with terror, the trio could only watch as the figures stepped out from the walls, their forms solidifying into spectral beings that radiated malice. The beings circled around them, their movements fluid and unnerving. One of the figures, taller and more imposing than the others, stepped forward. Its features were regal but twisted by a malevolent grin that revealed sharp, jagged teeth. "You have trespassed in the domain of the Forgotten." It hissed, its voice a mix of a whisper and a growl. "You must now face the consequences of your folly." The air around them thickened, the temperature dropping so rapidly that their breath became visible, puffing out in frantic white clouds. The spectral beings closed in, their hands reaching out with fingers that ended in sharp claw-like nails. Mark and Linda backed away, stumbling over the uneven ground. Jamie stood her ground. Though fear gripped her heart, part of her was driven by an insatiable need to understand, to uncover the truth behind the legends and ghost stories that had brought them to this current. Drawing on a reservoir of courage she didn't know she possessed, Jamie spoke, her voice echoing in the chamber. "We meant no disrespect. We seek only knowledge, the truth about this place. Tell us what you want from us." The spectral beings paused, and the chamber fell silent but for the sound of their ethereal breathing. The leader of the beings, the one with the jagged teeth, tilted its head, considering her words. Then, with a voice that resonated with the weight of eons, it replied, "Knowledge has a price, one that must be paid in suffering and sacrifice. Will you pay the price for the truth you seek?" The question hung in the air, a dire ultimatum that promised further horrors. Jamie swallowed hard, her resolve tested by the spectral being's ominous words. Yet driven by a deep-seated need to expose the mysteries of the past, she nodded, accepting the perilous path that lay ahead. The beings receded slightly, the glow from their eyes dimming as if satisfied by her answer. They motioned towards the hidden passageway, an unspoken invitation, or perhaps a command, to follow them deeper into the depths of the Forgotten. With a shared glance of grim determination, Jamie, Mark, and Linda stepped forward, crossing the threshold into the darkness, unaware of the true nature of the trials that awaited them in their quest for knowledge. As Jamie, Mark, and Linda crossed the threshold into the deeper bowels of the ancient structure beneath the gas station, a chilling air enveloped them, a stark contrast to the musty warmth they had grown accustomed to. The passage they entered was narrower, the walls closing in, as if the earth itself was trying to crush the life from their bodies. Their only light source, a flickering flashlight in Mark's shaking hands, cast long, monstrous shadows that seemed to dance and twist with malevolent intent. The corridor twisted and turned, a labyrinthine maze that felt designed to disorient and trap unwary travelers. The air was thick with the scent of damp and decay, punctuated by the distant, echoing drip of water. Each step they took was echoed by a chorus of whispers, the voices of the ancients who had once roamed these halls. The whispers were no longer just noises, but felt imbued with intent, reaching into their minds, stirring memories and fears best left forgotten. As they ventured deeper, the carvings on the walls became more elaborate and increasingly grotesque. Images of human-like figures engaged in what appeared to be dark rituals, their faces twisted and expressions of ecstatic agony covered the walls. These were not merely decorative, they seemed to tell a story, a history of this place and its dark purpose. Suddenly, the passage opened into a vast cavern, so wide that the beam of the flashlight could not reach the far walls. The ceiling arched high above, lost in shadows. In the center of this cavern stood an altar, much larger than the one they had seen before, made of a dark stone that seemed to absorb the light around it. The altar was stained with dark patches that Mark's flashlight revealed to be dried blood. As they approached the altar, a cold wind swept through the cavern, extinguishing the flashlight completely, plunging them into an oppressive darkness. Their eyes struggled to adjust, but it was the silence that overwhelmed them. The previous whispers had ceased abruptly, as if waiting for something dreadful to happen. In the pitch-black darkness, they heard the first sound, a low, guttural growl that seemed to come from directly beneath them. It was answered by another, and then another, until the cavern seemed filled with an invisible chorus of growls. The ground beneath their feet vibrated slightly, a sudden tremor that spoke of something large, something alive, moving just out of sight. Panic set in, and Linda clutched at Mark's arm, her voice a whispered plea. "What is happening?" Before Mark could answer, a dim, phosphorescent glow began to emanate from the altar itself. It cast a sickly green light over the cavern, revealing for the first time the true horror of their surroundings. Surrounding the altar, just at the edge of the light, were figures. Dozens of them. They were human in shape, but ghastly pale, their skin a translucent white that showed the dark veins beneath. Their eyes were sunken, glowing faintly with the same phosphorescent light as the altar. They stood perfectly still, watching. Jamie's heart raced as she realized these were not statues or carvings. They were the remnants of those who had come before, transformed by whatever ancient evil lingered in this place. The figures began to move, slowly, deliberately, closing the circle around Jamie, Mark, and Linda. The trio backed towards the altar, the only feature in the cavern they could navigate by. As they moved, the figures mirrored their movements, maintaining the circle but drawing ever closer. The growling grew louder, cacophony that seemed to shake the very air. "Stand back!" Jamie shouted, her voice echoing strangely in the cavern. To her surprise, the figures paused, their movements halting as if confused by her command. Seizing the moment, Jamie scrambled onto the altar, searching for anything, any weapon or artifact that might help them. Her hands found something etched into the top of the altar, grooves worn smooth by time. They formed a pattern, a symbol that seemed to pulsate under her touch. As she traced the symbol with her fingers, the growling ceased abruptly, and a deep silence fell. Then, a voice, ancient and echoing, filled the cavern. "Who dares to summon the guardians of the deep?" It boomed, resonating from the walls and the very air. Jamie stood, her body tense, ready for what might come. "We seek passage," she called out, her voice steady despite her fear. "We seek to understand the secrets of this place." The voice laughed, a sound that chilled them to their bones. "Many have sought understanding," it said. "All have become part of the deep. Will you join them, or will you prove yourselves worthy?" Before Jamie could respond, the ground trembled violently, a roar filling the cavern as if in answer to the voice. From the darkness beyond the circle of figures, something massive began to emerge, its form obscured but its intent horrifyingly clear. The trial they had to face was just beginning, and survival was far from certain. The ground beneath Jamie, Mark, and Linda shook with an intensity that threatened to split the ancient stone beneath their feet. A deep, resonant growl echoed through the cavern, the source unseen, but undeniably close. The trio clung to each other, their eyes wide with terror as they scanned the darkness, trying to discern the form of the creature that now hunted them. The figures surrounding the altar remained motionless, their eerie, glowing eyes fixed on the newcomers, as if they were both audience and participants in some ghastly ritual. Then, from the darkness, a massive shape emerged. Jamie's voice trembled as she addressed the creature, her words echoing in the cavernous space. "No harm," she declared, her voice barely above a whisper. "We seek only to understand the secrets of this place, to learn and to leave peacefully." The creature paused, its head tilting as if considering her words. Then, with a sound that was part roar and part laugh, it responded, its voice a guttural echo that vibrated through the stone. "This place has no secrets for the likes of you, only death. But prove yourselves worthy, and you may yet find what you seek." With a speed that belied its size, the creature lunged forward. Mark yanked Jamie and Linda back just as the creature's clawed hands swept through the space they had occupied. They scrambled away, dodging another swipe that sent stone chips flying. The creature roared in frustration, its eyes locked on its prey. The trio ran, dodging between the spectral figures that watched impassively. Their path took them deeper into the cavern, through narrow passages and over slick, wet stone. The creature pursued relentlessly, its growls a constant reminder of the danger just behind them. As they ran, Linda stumbled over a loose stone and cried out as she fell. Mark stopped to help her up, but the creature was upon them, its massive form blocking their path. Jamie looked around desperately, her eyes catching on a glint of metal embedded in the stone wall. Without thinking, she pulled it free, revealing a dagger with a handle carved in the shape of a serpent. With a cry, Jamie brandished the dagger. the blade catching the dim light as she thrust it towards the creature. The blade struck true, sinking deep into the creature's flesh. The creature howled in pain and rage, rearing back. Black blood oozed from the wound, sizzling as it hit the ground. Seizing the moment, Jamie pulled Mark and Linda to their feet, and they ran, following the winding path that seemed to lead them ever deeper into the earth. Behind them, the creature's roars grew fainter, but they did not slow down, driven by a primal fear that overrode all else. Eventually, the path widened, and they found themselves in another large chamber. This one was filled with statues, each carved from black stone and depicting various mythical creatures. In the center of the chamber stood a pedestal, upon which rested a book bound in dark leather. Jamie approached the pedestal, her hands trembling as she reached for the book. The cover was cool to the touch, and it opened with a creak of old leather. The pages were filled with ancient script, glowing faintly with the same phosphorescent light as the altar. As Jamie flipped through the pages, text seemed to shift and change, the letters rearranging themselves into a language she could understand. "The rites of the ancients," she read aloud, her voice echoing in the chamber. The book detailed rituals and ceremonies, some to appease the dark creatures of the earth, others to summon them or bind them to the will of the summoner. Jamie's eyes widened as she realized the power held within the pages. As they absorbed the knowledge contained in the ancient tome, the sound of stone grinding against stone filled the chamber. The statues around them began to move, stepping down from their pedestals. The trio watched in horror as the stone creatures surrounded them, their eyes glowing with the same malevolent light as the creatures they had escaped. Trapped, and with nowhere to run, Jamie clutched the book to her chest. "What do we do now?" Linda whispered, her voice trembling. Jamie looked around at the encircling stone figures, then back at the book. "Finish this," she said, her voice steady despite the fear that gripped her heart. She began to read from the book, her voice rising in a chant that filled the chamber, resonating with the power of the ancient words. As she chanted, the air around them began to shimmer, the ground vibrating with the force of the unleashed energies. The stone creatures paused, then one by one, they crumbled to dust, leaving only the echo of their presence behind. Exhausted but alive, Jamie closed the book. The chamber was silent once more, the threat seemingly ended. But as they turned to leave, they realized the path by which they had entered was gone, sealed off by the very forces they had unleashed. They were trapped, the secrets of the ancient rites their only companions as they searched for another way out. Their journey into the dark heart of the earth far from over. In the wake of the crumbling stone guardians, an oppressive silence enveloped the chamber. Jamie, Mark, and Linda huddled together near the ancient pedestal, the weight of their newfound isolation pressing heavily upon them. The book, now closed in Jamie's trembling hands, seemed to pulsate with a foreboding energy, as if it harbored spirits displeased by their liberation. The air grew colder, and a thin mist began to rise from the stone floor, swirling around their feet with ghostly intent. The chamber's walls, lined with faded frescoes and cryptic symbols, seemed to close in, the shadows deepening into dark recesses from which anything might emerge. Mark pointed his flashlight at the shifting shadows, but the beam flickered and dimmed, as if the darkness itself devoured the light. Jamie reopened the book, her fingers tracing the ancient text, seeking guidance or perhaps a way to reverse what they had unwittingly unleashed. As she flipped through the pages, a soft, haunting melody filled the air, a sound that seemed both beautiful and sad. It resonated from the very walls of the chamber, a lullaby of the lost that made their skin crawl. The melody grew louder, more insistent, and with it came voices, whispers at first, then clear, pleading calls. "Help us," they murmured. "Free us." Shadows danced at the edge of their vision, forms that were human-like but twisted, their silhouettes writhing in the mist. The spectral figures reached out with ghostly hands, their faces contorted in anguish. Linda said, her voice barely above a whisper, her eyes wide with terror as she clung to Mark's arm. But the path by which they had entered was sealed, the stone doorway now just part of the unyielding wall. They were trapped, with only the mysterious book as their guide. Mark took the flashlight and examined the chamber's walls, searching for any hidden mechanism or clue that might offer them escape. As he moved the beam along the wall, it illuminated a series of small niches, each containing a different elemental symbol: earth, air, fire, and water. These symbols pulsed faintly with the same phosphorescent glow as the book's text. Recalling a passage she had read, Jamie approached the niches. "The elements are key," she said, her voice echoing slightly in the still air. "They represent balance and power. Maybe they can open the way out." She placed her hand on the symbol of earth, feeling a subtle warmth beneath her palm. As each of them touched a symbol, the ground trembled and the air thickened. The chamber began to change, the walls slowly rotating, revealing another passage that had been hidden behind the elemental carvings. Relief walked over them briefly until they realized that this new passage plunged deeper into the earth, its downward slope leading into an even greater darkness. With no other options, they entered the passage, the haunting melody following them, a mournful echo that seemed to mourn their descent. The passage was narrow, the air growing denser, harder to breathe. Flickers of bioluminescent fungi cast an eerie glow on the walls, revealing more of the grotesque frescoes that depicted scenes of ancient rituals and celestial alignments. Directly in front of them was a smaller staircase, which they ran down before turning into a hallway. In pure black and white, the hallway looked less large than cramped in the dark. Suddenly, Linda stopped, her foot caught in something. She gasped as she looked down to see skeletal hands rising from the ground, grasping at her legs. Mark and Jamie rushed to her aid, pulling her free from the bony fingers that seemed almost desperate in their grip. The incident left them shaken, their progress cautious as they navigated around patches of bones that littered the floor, remnants of creatures, or perhaps people, who had once ventured into this forgotten underworld and never left. As they ventured deeper, a chilling realization dawned on them. The voices and the melody were growing stronger, not merely following them, but leading them. They were being drawn into the depths, not just by their quest for escape, but by something ancient that had its own design. Something that had waited in the dark for uncounted centuries. The passage finally opened into a vast underground lake, its water still and black as obsidian. Across the lake, a faint light glimmered, promising hope, or perhaps a final entrapment. Between them and the distant shore stood a decrepit boat, its timbers rotting, barely able to float. With no other way across, they climbed into the boat, the water stirring into gentle ripples that lapped ominously at the sides. Jamie took up the oars, her strokes tentative as the boat moved slowly across the dark water. Halfway across, the water beneath them began to churn, and a deep, bellowing roar sounded from below. Frightened but resolute, they continued to row, but it was clear something immense moved beneath the surface, something that did not appreciate their trespassing. The boat rocked violently, water splashing over the sides, soaking their clothes and chilling their skin. As they neared the opposite shore, the creature beneath surged upward, its massive form breaking the surface just behind the boat. They caught only a glimpse of scales and a maw filled with razor-sharp teeth, before rowing frantically, the shore only yards away. With one final, desperate effort, they reached the shallows, leaping from the boat as the creature crashed down behind them, the impact sending waves that pushed them tumbling onto the rocky shore. Panting, soaked, and terrified, they looked back at the lake, the creature's form disappearing beneath the still black water, leaving no trace of its existence. Ahead, the light beckoned them onward, deeper into the mystery and darkness of the earth, each step driven by a desperate hope to find a way back to the surface, and a lingering fear of what else might lie in wait in the uncharted depths of their subterranean prison. With the creature vanquished and the immediate danger past, Jamie, Mark, and Linda took a moment to gather themselves on the damp, rocky shore. The light they had seen was not the promise of an exit, but rather emanated from an intricate stone archway carved into the cavern wall ahead. Its design was ancient, with runic symbols and depictions of celestial alignments that suggested it was a gateway of significant importance. Drawn by a mix of curiosity and a lack of options, they approached it cautiously. As they neared the archway, the air grew electric, the hairs on their arms standing on end. The ground beneath their feet hummed with a deep, resonant vibration that seemed to pulse in time with their heartbeats. Jamie reached out tentatively, her fingers brushing the cold, moss-covered stone of the archway. The moment her skin made contact, the air around them crackled, and a bright light flashed, momentarily blinding them. When their vision cleared, they found themselves no longer in the expansive cavern, but in a narrow corridor lined with torches that cast flickering shadows against the damp walls. The shift was disorienting, and they took a few moments to acclimate to their new surroundings. The corridor stretched endlessly ahead and behind, the light from the torches too dim to see where it might lead. The silence in this new passage was oppressive, a stark contrast to the eerie lullaby of the lake's chamber. Now, there was only the sound of their own breathing and the soft crackle of the torches. The atmosphere was heavy, charged with anticipation, as if the corridor itself was waiting for them to make a move. With no clear direction, they chose to move forward, their footsteps echoing on the stone floor. The passage was not straight, but wound gently, as if spiraling deeper into the heart of the earth. As they walked, they noticed faint markings on the walls, not the bold carvings of the archway, but rather scratches that looked almost frantic, made by someone, or something, desperate. The further they went, the more intense the feeling of being watched became. Shadows seemed to flicker with a life of their own, twisting into forms that were almost human before dissolving into the darkness. Whispers floated through the air, words unintelligible but filled with urgent malice that made their skin crawl. Suddenly, the corridor opened into a small chamber, the center dominated by a large stone pedestal. Atop the pedestal sat an orb, glowing with a pulsating light that illuminated the room in a soft blue hue. The orb was encased in a lattice of fine silver filaments that twisted and turned around it like a cage. As they entered the chamber, the door through which they had come swung shut with a resounding boom, plunging them into near-total darkness save for the glow from the orb. Panic set in as they rushed to the door, pushing and shoving, but it was immovable, sealed as if it had never been a door at all. Turning back to the room, they approached the orb. The air around it was cooler, and the light it cast seemed to flicker with images, brief glimpses of other places, other times. Visions flashed before their eyes. A city of towering spires that gleamed under a twilight sky. A battlefield strewn with the bodies of strange creatures. A library filled with books that fluttered open as if caught in a breeze. The whispers grew louder, coalescing into a voice that spoke directly into their minds. The orb sees all times, all places, it intoned, echoing around the chamber. But knowledge requires sacrifice. What will you give to see, to understand? Before they could discuss a response, the chamber began to change. The walls closed in slowly, the ceiling descended inch by inch. Panic surged as the space became tighter, the air thinner. The voice continued, unrelenting. Decide, what is knowledge worth to you? Jamie, with a resolute look, stepped forward. We'll give what we must, she declared, her voice steady despite the fear. But not at the cost of our lives. We seek passage, not entrapment. The chamber halted its impressive advance, the voice pausing before replying. Courage in the face of the unknown is rare. Your path lies ahead. The walls of the chamber receded, revealing another archway that led to further depths. As they passed through the new archway, the corridor behind them collapsed, sealing off any return. Ahead, the path split into three, each shrouded in darkness, each whispering with its own sinister promise. With no way back, they chose the middle path, a decision made with bated breath as they ventured deeper into the labyrinthine depths, unaware of what trials or terrors awaited them in the heart of the ancient earth. Each step was a pact with the unknown, every breath a challenge to the dark, as they moved further from the world they knew into a realm defined by mystery and fear. As Jamie, Mark, and Linda delved deeper into the mysterious caverns, the silence is shattered only by their cautious steps. Each new turn in the ancient subterranean maze brings them face to face with chilling challenges and cryptic riddles, drawing them closer to uncovering dark secrets that can change everything. Yet, our thrilling journey is far from over. With every step into the unknown, more mysteries and perils await. What lies ahead for our trio? Will they uncover truths that offer salvation, or will the shadows claim them as they have so many before? The adventure continues. And the upcoming chapters promise even more suspense, enigmatic puzzles, and earth-shaking revelations. If you're riveted by their quest and eager for more, don't just watch. Join the adventure. Smash that like button, hit subscribe, and activate the notification bell. Dive into the comments below to share your theories, help decode the mysteries, or express your excitement for what's to come. To learn more about Trachial, the Prodigal Son, and smash that like button, hit subscribe and pipe, drop, and reorder and skip. Stay connected and you won't miss any of the action or clues as we explore deeper into the cavern together in our next episodes. What secrets do the ancient stones hold? What dangers lurk around the next corner? Find out by staying tuned and engaged. So, prepare for more heart-stopping twists and turns. Every like, comment, and share drives this adventure forward and helps us uncover the dark mysteries buried deep within the earth. Subscribe now and let's continue this thrilling journey together in the next exciting installment of this epic saga. Don't miss out. Adventure awaits.